Hey, hi, and hello, everyone. We are so excited to be here for our November edition of the Talent Table. We've got some amazing guests here, so I'm going to do just a few quick housekeeping things, and then we're going to jump right into our content. So before we get started, take a look at the bottom of the screen. You're going to see some widgets that will do things. If you click them, you can ask us questions. There's further reading and also an opportunity to sign up for the Talent Table for next month. So ask us questions. We may not get to them right away, but we will do our best to either answer them in the flow of our conversation or in a future medium. Could be a podcast, a blog, or maybe another webinar. All right, we are going to jump right in. We have three amazing guests, and so I am going to allow them to introduce themselves, and then we will get started. My name is Rebecca Warren. I am part of our talent-centered transformation practice here at Eightfold, where we talk about things through the lens of talent rather than jobs or job descriptions. So we're about skills, we're about AI, we're about all the cool things. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it over first to our colleagues here from Finley. We're going to start with Kirsten, and then we'll flip it over to Jennifer, and then to Martin. So over to you.
All right. Hello, everybody. I am Kirsten Mickish, and I lead People and Culture, HR, here for Finley, and am very excited to be with you here today on this topic. It is something that I am immersed in and am finding a lot of energy from. So just very excited to be part of this conversation.
All right, Jennifer.
Hello, good morning, afternoon, depending on where you are. Jennifer Burns, I lead technology and innovation, working alongside Kirsten for Finley, and just delighted to be here and look forward to the conversation.
All right, Martin, wrap us up here.
Hi there. So I'm Martin Collier. I head up innovation and AI for Lace Partners. And for those that don't know, Lace Partners is an end-to-end HR transformation business based in the UK, but with many, many global clients.
All right, so with all of these brilliant minds on our chat today, I think we're going to have a really engaging conversation. But before we get there, I always do a question of the month, and this one is about weather. So which season shows your state's true personality? Is it winter or summer? Because we all like to pick that spring or fall. We're not doing that. We're doing summer or winter, and why? So who wants to start, summer or winter, on where you live? So you have to tell us where you live and then tell us the season.
I can start.
Okay, great.
So I am in Minnesota, and so I think people assume I'm going to say winter because that's what we're known for, is winter in Mall of America. However, I'm going to say summer because if you haven't been to Minnesota, probably, in my opinion, one of the greatest things about this state is the wooded areas, the lakes, the incredible outdoor space, and to be able to enjoy that in the summer is incredible.
All right, I actually thought you were going, I wouldn't have expected you to say winter. Who says that? That's why I moved. Okay, who's next?
Well, I'll go next because I have the opposite response to that. I am also in Minnesota. And I will go with winter because winter actually is my favorite month. It's the holidays here. We also have a variety of outdoor activities because we do have cold weather for a lot of the year. So things like cross-country skiing, some downhill skiing, not as great as Colorado, but we have ice fishing. So there's a lot of things that you can do outdoors. Plus, it's very beautiful. And anyway, I love Minnesota because of the winter.
Well, my husband is absolutely in your camp, Jennifer. And I think as long as you can get the right clothing, it's okay. Mm-hmm. I just don't like the inconvenience of winter. I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And winter seems to screw that up most times. But you're right. It is beautiful, especially if you're dressed appropriately. All right, Martin, what you got for us? Where are you and what are you going to share?
Well, being a British person, then the conversation of the weather is never too far from anybody's lips. But I would say that I'm based in London, and it's not a season, it's all of the seasons, because generally we will get rain, wind, shine, or some form of wintry weather all in one day. So I couldn't pick one, but how I will do a summer in London you cannot beat.
Got it. All right. I did spend a week this summer in London, and I agree it was wonderful. So all of you have the right answer for you. So, okay, let's jump into our topic, which has nothing to do with weather, although there might be some seasonal things in there about how things shift and change. But today we are talking about somewhat of an operational question. So, should HR and IT work in parallel as opposed to in silos? And if so, how does that happen? How are we going to do that? So we've seen tons of headlines lately about organizations who are figuring out how to put things together, sometimes merging those functions, which used to live very, very separately. A few years ago, I'm not sure that any of us would have considered that, but after the pandemic, a lot of things have changed, and I think we've shifted in how we look at work. I think we still have a ways to go. But as we are now defined by AI acceleration and constant change, aligning people and processes is less of a nice to have and is becoming much more of a priority. So here's what I want to talk about today is how much tighter can HR and IT collaboration get? Can it supercharge your organization, or is it going to cause problems? How do you start that conversation if you're ready to do that? And why this could be the key to unlocking AI's potential to move seamlessly across an organization. It's probably not going to be this year since we only have, a month and a half left. Maybe not even next year, but coming in the future. Is this the opportunity for AI to be able to go throughout the organization? All right, we ready for this? Let's go. Okay. So first, I think we should talk about that strategic need for change. What does that possible transformation look like? And why is this something that organizations are looking at and considering? So from a tech or a strategic perspective, what do we think has changed in the status quo that means legacy HR and IT working models are becoming outdated or less effective? And this one, Martin, I would love to shoot it over to you first to get your broad opinion on what you're seeing, what you're thinking, what you're hearing about this potential shift in these two departments.
So it's such a key topic at the moment, because you can see that, for the past 10, 20 years, that relationship between the CIO and your chief HR officer has often sort of felt either slightly adversarial or not necessarily kind of working in tandem. So I think what we're seeing now is the sort of that evolution of actually where you've got the key dependencies, where the rise of and ease of deployment of technology, it's never been easier to get hold of, to deploy technology in and of itself. So therefore it becomes easier for HR and people teams in order to do that themselves. But it often creates that rub then with your CIO and your technology teams, because there are elements of control. So I think we're certainly getting to that stage where we're starting to ask questions, particularly with AI and almost the use of how those tools are going to start to impact the workforce. So you can begin to see that these are now very much interdependent sets of considerations when you're looking at governance, you're looking at data, you're looking at the design of those tools. Because for the first time, I will say, we're actually having a real impact on the operating models of all businesses, and not only within HR teams, but obviously the services that we provide and the services that we share with customers. So we term it as something increasingly that power couple. So you need to be working in harmony. There needs to be a happy marriage between the two functions in order to make sure that you've got a harmonious set of services and technology for your customers, your employees.
I like that you read my LinkedIn post about, are they the power couple or the odd couple? So I love that. I think we can continue to weave that in here. So Kirsten, you and I had breakfast together, I don't know what, a month or so ago, and we started this conversation, and that's where this webinar came out of, was our conversation. So I would love to hear you and Jennifer talk about how you decided to start working more closely together, and where y'all are at. So it doesn't matter to me which one of you starts, because I have questions for both of you. So, but Kirsten, talk to me a little bit about that, that conversation that started about that partnership.
Yeah, well, I think what's wonderful is, and probably made it easier for us, is that we both kind of naturally are aligned in our thinking around this. So it was a pretty natural coupling, if you will. And it's interesting because I recently attended another webinar with AI as the focus, and there was an attendee that commented that since this is a human transformation and not a technology transformation, HR needs to lead this. And that surprised me, and it was interesting to me because I think this is both a technology transformation and a human transformation. And if we don't very, very tightly partner in a aligned way, we are not going to be able to have both the strategic and operational value. We're not going to be able to successfully lead, this transformation, which is a blend of technology and human, in a way that provides value and leads the company to success. So, but both Jen and I have backgrounds in transformation, broader transformation, enterprise transformation, system implementations, those kind of things. And so we already had a bit of a shared experience, shared language situation. And so that enabled us to much more quickly kind of couple and start this conversation.
Well, and of course, if we look at your backgrounds, you both have a different flavor of that, right? The work is technical, the results are human, complex tech made human. Like, you have both of those pieces in your background. So it totally makes sense that you would come together. So Jennifer, were there any barriers to the partnership, like things that maybe Kirsten couldn't share with you or you couldn't share with her based on your role? Or was it easy for you to start really partnering closely?
I came in shortly after Kirsten did to Finley, and my initial role was in transformation. So that was my primary focus. And from the technical side, I've worked in many organizations that are going through IT change and also organizational change. So this was marrying both of those very strongly together. So my clear partner was Kirsten, representing the people side of our organization. So it was actually quite easy. She's a wonderful person. Plus, she's highly experienced. And what she said, we both have worked on, technical implementations, and we've both worked in organizational change. So really, it was two experienced people coming at this from a little bit of a different background. But really, we did have that common language already, and we did have a pretty clear roadmap that aligned very closely on how to approach what we needed to do with Finley, and ultimately execute it, keeping forefront of mind what we needed to do from a technology standpoint, and how do we bring people along for that, making sure that they have a voice in the changes that are happening. The fingerprint principle, where they want to see how they're contributing to that change, which obviously too, when people can see it and they're involved in it, that's going to drive adoption. So, change is not easy. It's a big freighter ship that can take quite a bit of time to turn, but we both had a very kind of clear and aligned path, and we continue to work very closely together as we're moving forward and continuing this journey.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's really important to understand the perspectives of the leaders of the teams and then figure out how to cascade that down. So you two figured out, how do we work together? What overlaps do we have? What specialties do we have? And then how do we make sure we have that transparency in the organization? I think that's awesome. As we think about um, really large matrixed organizations, right? We've worked at some of those as well. Martin, is this a pipe dream for some of these really big organizations?
No, it's certainly not a pipe dream, but it's probably the time with which it will take to move and change. So I think it's for some organizations where there's been quite a traditional split between the two functions, then that reality is not going to be something that will continue into the future, but it's more the time that it will take to get there. So I think it's, in essence, you've got things that you're going to have to look at in terms of changes of mindsets, actually understanding what the sort of the key skill sets that are required, and then really starting to look at how you govern, across the organization. But ultimately, this is increasingly a team sport, and it's not either or; it's both, and that is the way that people will get success. But the thing that we're talking to lots of people about now is just that now is the time to start those conversations and just to make sure that you're kind of making the right steps.
Okay, so I'm going to throw something in that I read recently, which I thought was super interesting, which is exactly opposite of what we're talking about. So, Peter Capelli is HR Executive's talent management columnist. And he's also the director for the Center of Human Resources of the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. So, he's not new to this scene. And he said in an article he wrote for HR Executive, a month or so ago, the buzz was about whether HR and IT functions could and possibly should merge. It sounds like a bad idea because it is. Each of the two have so many separate tasks where there is no overlap, and trying to put them together would be senseless. So I'm just going to let that sit. I did not say this. Peter Capelli did. So I think where I want to go with that statement is, we've already talked about how we feel it could be an advantage, but I would love to hear your thoughts on what happens if organizations say we are absolutely not merging, we are going to stay separate. Like, what happens in organizations with AI and what's coming? It's already here, right? What happens in organizations that keep these two functions siloed while other organizations are moving towards a more shared framework? So whoever wants to jump in on this one, but like, what do you think happens to organizations who choose not to partner?
So I'd like to just step in, if I may, real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I thought about those words from Peter, in my mind, merge is pretty radical. I would not agree with merging necessarily. I think there's a different approach. What I think about is integration of components of our roadmap that are going to impact each other. This is more of a symbiotic relationship between HR and IT, and it has to be as we move forward. We have to understand how people work and what they need to advance their jobs. What really makes sense for the people in the organization? What makes sense for our clients? So we need to understand that from the people view, and then IT, as we solution for that, need to be work very closely with the people side, so that when we do decide on what is the best solution, we can drive that through proper upskilling and training, and make sure that we have change champions in place that are helping to drive that adoption. So I don't look at it necessarily as merging, because there are still going to be things that we don't necessarily do together. Sure. But at the same time, when it comes to the evolution of how we're working through automation and AI capabilities, we do have a necessary relationship, and we must have integrated roadmaps so that we're caring for all of those nuances, the components, and we truly are thinking about what's right for our clients and for our people, and how to deploy those things.
So you're saying more alignment, collaboration, integration of the right things, but you still have separate functions that need to do different things. So not
Yes.
merging, but alignment. Okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Rebecca, if I could add, because I think about it the same way, but I think about it in terms of kind of a Venn diagram. And we each have our areas of expertise and experience and that are different, but they are very, very complementary, particularly in this space. And so, where that overlap happens in that Venn diagram, that's the place where we have to be very, very tightly partnered. And as Jen said, with that shared roadmap, shared goals, some shared language, shared appreciation for each other and what each other has to bring. And that can't just be at our level. We have to make sure that that permeates both of our organizations so that the broader company and all of the humans that are we need to play along with this can feel the very positive impact of that partnership.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just going to build on that. So I think, to say, I understand where Peter's coming from, because to all the points that have just been made, there are clearly areas of responsibility that will need to remain areas of responsibility within each of the functions. But again, I would never take these things as an either or. What I would say is that you could have separate leadership, but increasingly we're seeing then sort of co-working teams or product teams that sit below that leadership, where you are working together, because that's an absolute necessity, or vice versa, where you've got maybe some areas of common leadership, but still separate responsibilities or skill sets, up to the organization and the business level, either from supporting business aims and ambitions or risk, for instance. So you're always going to have some separations of duty, but the key thing is to be clear about what the responsibilities are, where the requisite skill sets are. And ultimately, we're still coming back to the point where how is technology being used to support either customers or employees? So we're not forgetting what the target of what we're really trying to do here just by saying, oh, well, it's this part of the business or that part of the business. It's got to be in unison. So I think I understand the argument, but I think there's probably a lot more nuance that sits below it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, so if we're talking about that alignment, integration, collaboration, those together words, what are some compelling shared goals then that could cross those boundaries, whether it starts in IT, whether it starts in HR? What are some of those things that make sense to align and collaborate on to break down some of those silos?
Well, I can throw a couple out there.
Do it.
I think the shared objectives, shared OKRs with the accountability is very important. And so things that we can do jointly and measure kind of in our respective lanes, but that come together for, a uniform outcome would be things like reducing cycle time. If it's in the onboarding space, training space, approvals, making our systems and our workflows more efficient. That's an area that we could certainly measure. Adoption, as we've talked about already, it's not about just launching our tools or our systems, but it's ensuring that those tools and systems truly fit with the way that people work and that they're using them in meaningful ways. So then you can, look at some kind of specific metrics around efficiency, productivity, things like that. Obviously, too, in the HR space, taking a pulse on employee engagement and employee satisfaction. You'll also see things from the client's perspective, doing a client eyes type of survey or outreach to see how is what we're changing internally if affecting or impacting their experience. So
Right.
Those, I think, are some pretty important things that we could jointly do together that have some tangible outcomes that could be measured.
Okay, let me jump onto that for a quick second, because I think that's really interesting when you said like client satisfaction or what they're seeing. So would you ever tell them, like, we're working to combine functions or try to make things more smoothly? Or is it just seeing their increased satisfaction with how things are going? Are you transparent? Like, and maybe not are you, but would you be
Mhm.
transparent and tell your customers what you're doing? I'm just throwing it out there for anyone.
And I'll just wrap up my
Yeah.
little piece here and then turn it over to the other two. But we have been transparent, and our clients, through transformation, especially radical types of transformations that many companies are going through, they notice these things because it's not always smooth sailing. There are going to be interruptions. So from a client management standpoint, I believe in transparency to the degree that says we are making changes. Our expectation and intention is to make it so that we can deliver optimal, and improved experiences for you, maximizing your investment in us. So there is a level of transparency there. I think we need to prove that out, though, too, by having clear measures in place.
And I would add and kind of expand on that both internal to our employees and external to any key stakeholders that might be impacted, if we aren't transparent, if we aren't proactive in kind of sharing what we're doing and to what end, and how we're going about that, we miss the opportunity to create that narrative, and there's a lot of fear out there related to this. And so to the extent that we can help people understand this is the journey that we're on, this is why it's so important, here's what you should feel, experience, here's what the outcomes should be. And then, as Jen mentioned before, making sure that people that are going to be impacted by this have a voice. And so to the extent that they are worried about this, or they're hearing other things, or they're experiencing things that we don't intend, that there are mechanisms in place for them to tell us that, so that we can adjust along the way. But I think that proactive communication and transparency, and of course doing it in a way that speaks to your audience and has the both the interests of the company and what we're trying to do, coupled with the interests of key stakeholders. I think that's critical.
Yeah, I love that thought. We're hearing a lot about that in the industry, in the spaces, about transparency and feedback loops. That's continued to come up, especially over the last couple of weeks as I'm talking to people, that there has to be feedback loops set up for both internal and external. And I mean, it's just like engagement surveys, right? If people put a whole bunch of stuff down there, we don't do anything with it, then it's moot, right? So we have to not only have the loops, but we have to take those things into consideration, whether it's coming from customers or clients or whether it's coming from internal. So I totally see where you're coming from. That totally makes sense on how that happens. Martin, talk to me a little bit about the broader idea of, should this be a leadership driven change, or should this be a groundswell? How are you seeing and hearing about that in the work you do?
Well, I think it needs to be both for different reasons. So, if you think about a lot of what we've just been talking about in terms of transformation, it's not easy, but it has to be driven and led from leadership behaviors from the top. Because I think if the intentions aren't there, if the shared goals, as we were just talking about, the vision and purpose isn't necessarily aligned, then you're not getting off on the right foot from the outset. So there's a critical part of that. And I think then in turn, it's that clarity of understanding and messaging down into the teams, the transformation program, team members, it's critical then for them to be clear as to, well, what does this mean for me? What is my role with this? What's my area of responsibility? What are the things that I can do to help? And I think then at which point we've got that sort of different degrees of ownership that people have, as well as being clear on what the motivations are and what the outcomes are, and what this is going to be in the service of and support of. So I completely agree on the points around bringing this back to, which is that feedback loop of saying, well, as a leadership team, if we've really set the vision out and we've got anything that's coming through from from the teams, then at which point, what are we going to do if something isn't right? How do we course correct? How do we act at pace? Which is, again, back to the broader topic of why it's so important for both teams to be working together, because if there's a common understanding between HR and IT, then you've got a better chance of being able to adapt quickly in order to then move faster, because if not, it only impacts people's morale, and critically, in this day and age, then the cost of what it takes to go through these types of transformation, which can be huge. But again, being able to act quick to avoid those things is really important from those leadership and team behaviors.
So are we thinking like a RACI chart? Are we thinking a Venn diagram? Like, are we talking about a glossary of common terms? Like, what does this practically look like, right? If you, Jen and Kirsten, if you're doing shared projects, do people have the same language? Do they have the same understanding? Like, how should this be laid out from a practical perspective?
I mean, we're in early stages, but we have a number of strategic imperatives, and one of them is around future readiness for the organization. And it isn't just AI, right? There's a number of aspects of future readiness that we are looking at, but we have a team of people that are representative across the organization. But where Jen and I are very much connected around how we're shaping this up. So we have members from both of our teams on this joint team, the strategic imperative kind of team. And as well as folks from other functions, but we're building a shared kind of future ready framework with AI as an important part of that. And we'll be, one of the things that we'll be doing is kind of integrating or overlapping our roadmaps from a technology and kind of a human perspective. So this is one part of future readiness. It's a big part and it's probably the most transformative part of it. But we're looking at it kind of holistically and then making sure that we've got, she and I are aligned first and foremost around that framework and the approach, that we've got the right people involved. And then we'll start building out plans.
I love that shared team. I'm in this hotel room in Dallas, and so all I have is like the little paper from the so I'm like writing on my lap, taking notes. Y'all are saying great things, so if I'm looking down, that's what I'm doing. But I love that so that maybe is the key, right? The first thing is maybe a shared leadership team around those strategic initiatives. And I loved what you said, Kirsten, because it's not just Jen's team and your team, right? This affects your organization. So I love where you said that you're pulling in other people to help give that diverse perspectives on how it affects people and what you're looking at. And I also love what you said is that, yes, it's AI, but it's everything about how the company needs to function to be future ready. So love that. I think that takes a lot of the angst away when people feel like they're represented, potentially heard, building in those loops and making sure that folks are all sharing their perspectives to make sure that you're getting the ultimate outcome. Okay, other thoughts on that, Jen or Martin?
I was just going to add, we in kind of probably reiterating some of the points there, but adding, we certainly some of the programs where it's trying to make sure you're coalescing around that common set of responsibility, in that shared leadership team, which is obviously critical, but underneath that going almost very practical. On some programs, it's been, well, as a leadership team, what are we going to contract to the business and almost have that shared contract and mission statement. So it really helps, because of what we're doing is setting out what our commitments are, the things that the shared objectives, why we're actually proceeding through whatever that transformation is. And look, let's face it, we're all going to go through huge transformation over the coming 5 and 10 years with what AI is bringing us. But equally is then setting out some very clear statements to not only the transformation teams, but to the business. And I think particularly when you're looking at AI, there's a level of responsibility that both teams now critically have, because of the nature of how AI will impact people's roles, the type of skills that are going to be needed, and then all the way right through to the level of governance around data, for instance. So we're going to have so much more coming down the line of shared data responsibility, but making sure that that's done in a sensible way, and then getting very, very bringing back to the human element of this, saying, well, what's this going to look and feel like as we go through that change? Because when you're in the middle of any transformation, it can often be that there will be differences of opinion. That's natural. But if you go back to what the shared mission statement or contract was, you've still got something that you're all collectively working towards.
And I think that's a really important point, because there is so much right now that's available to us to adopt. And we do need to really be clear on what is our mission, what is the vision for our company, and then use that as the gating criteria on what are we going to bring in. And to your earlier point, we do have some of those really kind of more rigid, structured tools in place, like a RACI, because we need to be sure that we are having an open flow of ideation and innovation, but at the same time that we are staying true to our mission, and that it's very clear on who is deciding, who needs to be consulted, who needs to be responsible, who's informed. So it is very important to carry through some of these traditional change management practices while we're in this space of heavy creativity, innovation, and ideation.
Okay, so y'all are saying all the right things. What happens when there's a disagreement? Like, who wins? Is it, IT? Is it HR? Is it a throwdown in the parking lot? Is it rock, paper, scissors? Like, who ultimately gets to win? How do you decide that? I mean, there's a lot of hands in the cookie jar there, right? So is it the RACI chart? Is it, I don't know, whoever has the better office? Like, I don't know. Like, what decides?
We, you can kind of start simple. So when it comes to a technology platform, who has ownership over what? So the way that we kind of block and tackle, we look at platform versus product, and, what falls under each of those. So from a platform perspective, and the configuration and the integration and the capabilities, enabling those capabilities, IT is responsible and accountable for that. HR is going to be the platform owner. So what is it that we want to enable, what we want to activate? What are those capabilities that we want to see and equip and empower our workforce with? So there is delineation there. Sometimes there are some discussions and we have to reach agreement on certain things. But overall, I'd say that there is some pretty clear delineation between, who does what and is making certain decisions.
Yeah, I think the ownership piece, getting clear on that, first and foremost. But I also think what is helpful is ahead of time agreeing on some decision criteria. And so, from a values perspective, for example, or as we think about the ethics behind this, but having so that we've got that criteria that we can check ourselves against as we are trying to get aligned and get to agreement around really key decisions. And so if we've got that decision criteria, clear ownership, and then kind of the roles and responsibilities, the RACI stuff figured out, and we're continuing to go back to that when we get in these situations because we've agreed to it before there was a conflict, I think those things are incredibly helpful.
So have you had to monitor any parking lot brawls, or have you all been able to resolve that before it gets there?
I haven't had to do that. Any.
We have our own secret ways of mitigating any of those types of things. So.
Yeah, there you go.
I love that. Okay. Martin, any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, probably. I think the main one is that completely having all of the right structures and areas of responsibility and decision-making frameworks are all really, really important. Often, and particularly what we're seeing hugely at the moment with on two fronts. One is the availability of new technology and how easy sometimes it is to go and use, is then almost leading some unintended consequences. And what that then in turn is often the thing that is driving some of these decision making where there might be disagreement, because it's not often because these things are being sort of completed or acted upon from a point of ill will or something. Is often a lack of understanding of why something's important that then is in turn setting up that conflict to go, I didn't realize that the unintended consequences. So if I give some examples where, because there's availability of either certain AI products that are pretty readily available and looking at how those can be used within a business, then the unintended consequences of data use within those almost becomes critical. So there's a skill set and kind of an education piece that goes with this that will help to get the different perspectives of why things are important and hopefully mitigate some of those debates and arguments before you get to the parking lot.
Yeah, and that, before you get to the parking lot, I love that. And so let's talk about that from a skill set perspective as a perfect lead into what I wanted to talk about next is, should we then, as Finley clearly is thinking about future-proofing your workforce, you're looking forward, what do we need to get there? Are there particular skill sets that either you're prioritizing in your organization or you are proactively looking for to get you to that next step of what that looks like in terms of being future ready? So, Kirsten, is there anything in particular you're doing in HR to prioritize those skill sets currently and or in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we're actually right in the process of defining future ready skills, both connected to AI, but also just as we think about where the company's going from the services that we provide our clients and so on. So we've gotten through kind of phase one of a current skills inventory. We're now looking at what are those future skills. And we're again doing that in a very joint manner. But we're in the very early stages of that. Once we get those things outlined, though, to your point, we will be looking at that both with respect to our current employees and where there might be some skills gaps there. But we'll also be looking at that with respect to workforce planning and recruitment and how we continue to build those capabilities for the future. So very early stages, but we're on the way.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you're thinking about not just the day-to-day, right? But what does that look like for agility? What does that look like for, we spend some time talking about, are you data informed? Are you data active, right? So I'm guessing from Jennifer's point of view too, is looking for what are those skill sets of folks that have more agility or understand how to work more with data. So you're not just stuck where you are, right? Did I just make that up? I might have just.
Yeah, no, and I'll make one comment on that is we have kind of, I'm going to kind of simplify here, but two big categories of skills. One set is workplace effectiveness skills. And that is where when you talk about, the ability to adapt or the agility or some of those things, those are those workplace effectiveness skills that cut across functions. And then we've got, as you get into some of the more technical skills, those may be aligned with jobs or functions, or maybe broadly aligned, but with different levels of proficiency. And so we're looking at both of those. But there's also a behavioral aspect of this that we're looking at. And that is when you, I've talked to a number of folks that are in their 20s, and they are very skeptical about the ability to effectively use AI in organizations. And what I've heard, the theme that I've heard is that people, they're humans and they're flawed. And in many cases, they're busy or I'll just take that shortcut so there's some behavioral things there that we have to set expectations very clearly, but then we've got to find mechanisms to hold people accountable so that the way we're applying our skills with respect to AI is being done very responsibly and with the outcomes, the mission, why are we doing this in mind so that we get those outcomes.
So it is that skill set, mindset, tool set, right? Because if you don't change the culture of your organization, you're not going to get that adoption. You're not going to get the folks that are earlier in their career who are really skeptical. I know my son just sent me something. He's like, Mom, watch this. AI is evil. I'm like, I don't think that's right. So we'll have a conversation. But I think you have to get all of those folks, whether they're very set in how they're used to doing things, the folks that are AI positive, AI skeptical. I think that behavioral piece is really important on top of, and I love that you said that, workplace effectiveness skills and then tech skills. Okay, that I think gives folks a lot of room to understand how should I be tackling this from a skill set and future readiness perspective. Okay. Martin, I want to ask you this question, and then maybe Jennifer, if you want to weigh in on this one. So when we talk about, and Martin, you mentioned this about technologies that are very easy to plug in, set up, and use, right? Are there emerging technologies that can help connect the IT and HR functions? Like, should folks be looking for specific tech to do that? Or do you think it should stay from a people foundation and then building it this way?
I think it very much depends on the business, and from how your kind of current sort of working patterns are, or even sort of geography. So I think you're going to have a variation of those things. So I think we should absolutely keep the human, which is the standard phrase that we're hearing all the time now, human in the loop, for a number of different reasons. But that absolutely is still critical in terms of teamwork. So making sure that, again, there's common areas of where, if it's communications, if it's tech. Now clearly, we're sat here talking to each other, probably thousands of miles away from each other. So there's different ways that we can bridge that gap, and to make sure that we're still obviously communicating the right way. But what I would say, the key point is communication itself. So it's making sure there's clear understanding to what we've just been talking about, that people feel comfortable that you're able to achieve that. And equally, where it's not working, then you've got almost the ability to circuit break some of those to then fix those problems. Because I guess this is where transformations often get stuck, is that where these things break down and they cause then time and delays, etc. So I think it is very much around that communication, and tech is going to be almost a byproduct of understanding what the environment is that you're working within. But it's just it's a modern factor of kind of where we are. And again, that's not going to change. But it's those, again, come back to the skills, it's understanding then that there is a different skill set that's needed equally to operate in that type of sort of hybrid, virtual, physical environment.
Yeah, so it's not one size fits all, right? There's no, because company A did this, company B did that. We get a lot of folks saying, hey, what have your customers done in the past? And we're like, well, we can tell you what they did for them, but it's going to look different for you. So don't take it as, because this company did it and they're in the same industry, that's the right way to do it. You have to take your people and your tech into consideration. And at this conference that I'm at here, we have a speaker, Tal Goldhammer, I think I said that right. And he talked about that phrase. So we talked about human in the loop and feedback and all of that. And he actually said something which I'm going to start adding into my vernacular, is human in the lead. I kind of like that idea. We're not just informing humans. Humans are driving this, using technology to make us better. So, Jen, what are your thoughts on all of that we just said?
All of that.
Let's throw it in your lap. What do you got?
Well, yeah, I mean, my history tracks back to interpersonal communication. I am always going to lead with what you just said, humans in the lead. Technology is great. It's a companion to what we do. It should never be a competitor. We have to have our arms around controlling, monitoring, managing, and we really have to have that human out in front, driving those connections, maximizing interactions, optimizing the relationships. That is a very human thing. And I think we, especially right now, as we're seeing these advancements in, general intelligence and, moving to super intelligence, we have to be very, very aware and out in front of this as humans to be sure that we've got the proper, controls and management in place, and that we don't lose ourselves in the technology. And so I will always kind of lead with be the person that's making those connections. Come out, exercise that interpersonal communication competency that is a very, very human thing. And we don't want to lose that in the technology game.
I took a note on that. I love where you said that tech should be a companion, not a competitor. I think that's just a very concise way to say that. Like, it should help us, not fight us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So as we think about, and we're coming into the tail end here, so I've just got one more kind of general question, and then we'll do our wrap up close. But as we think about AI becoming more agentic, right? When we think about an agent that's able to complete a task without a lot of human intervention, doesn't mean that humans aren't leading that charge. And we think about agentic AI workflows or swarms, where you have multiple agents who are going to be working through a process. So maybe it's, if we think about for talent acquisition, maybe it's a TA swarm where you've got an agent doing the interview, you've got another agent working through the scheduling, you've got, there's still human pieces in there, but the workflow doesn't need humans to kick it off or to move it to the next stage. So if we think about those workflows, that can happen without a lot of intervention unless they hit a speed bump. How are y'all thinking about like ethics and like making sure that you have your strategy team to help figure out how things get aligned, but how are you thinking about compliance and the legal piece of it, and what does that look like from an ethical standpoint to make sure that organizations have a point of view, at least on how you're going to handle bias or compliance or questions? Like, what does that ethical piece look like? And I'll turn it to the Finley folks first, and then Martin to give kind of your overview, if that works.
Yeah, I mean, again, in very early stages, but I was talking to a past coworker of mine from another company who works at a tech company, and she said, we are going all in on AI recruitment. And like all in, to the extent that they can turn it over to AI, they're going to do that. And I said, cool. What are you doing to on the front end and then also on the back end to be able to kind of audit for? Well, first of all, create these workflows and use this tool in a way that you believe will minimize bias, will be effective from an ethical compliance and also an effectiveness and efficiency perspective. What are you doing to design it and then audit it and then be able to quickly correct if you see anything? And she goes, oh, that's a good question. So I'm a little worried about that, but I think, there's got to be an element of that in the design process.
Yes.
There's got to be really good mechanisms to kind of monitor and audit. And then you need to be able to quickly course correct. And I also think about it in addition to kind of the ethical compliance and so on. I also think about it from the standpoint of how many of us, when we are in looking for some kind of human interaction, go agent, representative, agent. Like, no. And I think about the recruitment process. And as Jen talked about, one of the things that we want to be very, very mindful of is those points in that process, or any process, by the way, that are going to be important to keep human, because one of the things I'd want to know is how many people are dropping out if they go, oh, this is like, I don't even get a person talking to me. And Finley, both internally and with our clients, is known for long-term, really trusting partnerships and that interpersonal exchange and mutual benefit and all those things. And so we have to also think about it very carefully with respect to how we operate and therefore what we're known for and what helps differentiate us in the market. But also internally, our employees say that across the board at a very high percentage, that what they love about Finley, what they tell people about Finley, and what they hope we never lose is that we care. So we've got to also be looking at it through that lens.
Those are great call outs. I love that. And don't lose the relationship, but make sure that the work is getting done as effectively, efficiently as possible. Okay.
Yeah. And the only other thing I would add is, as you said that is, and as I've been, really kind of spending a lot of time learning is one of the things that struck me is looking at this through the lens of tasks, not jobs. And so we're going to, now have recruiter. We don't need a recruiter because we'll have all that, a machine do all of that. It's rather, which are the tasks within this particular process or discipline that we could. Yeah.
Love that.
We want to take the mundane tasks, the drudgery, the things that don't require the human element, and then free up our associates to do the human thinking, right?
Absolutely. It should inspire and amplify our creativity, our strategy, our ability to do that people-focused work, right? So, Jen, I think that's how a lot of folks are looking at it. How do we automate or give an agent the opportunity to do the work that we don't add value to so that we can do that value-added work? All right, Martin, what are your thoughts on this? And then we're going to do our quick closing question.
Right, so I'll keep it brief, but I think almost coming back to the going full circle on the topic of conversation, coming back to where the responsibilities are, it's a perfect example where between your HR team and your IT team need to come together to look at be it whether it's looking at the implications of bias, as we've just been talking about, or on the IT side, actually understanding what the implications and use of AI is. And one thing we talk about at the moment hugely is what's the transparency of actually understanding what the AI is doing, because at which point then you've got a sense of responsibility and ownership that you can figure out what the unintended consequences are, again, in terms of and implications. So it's critical between the two. The final thing I'll say very, very briefly is that we're also seeing that there's a lot of risk that's happening, or risk aversion that's happening at the moment. So people are scared, but actually it's not necessarily about scared being and then putting things off, because it's limiting the potential use and ability to start adopting all the good things that can come with it. It's actually just getting practical of saying, well, what are the key things we need to consider? What's the regulation we need to consider? What's the data implications? What's the implications on our people? And that's not something to be put off. That has to start now, because we're on a one-way path at the moment. It just depends on what path you take and how quickly you can start to get there.
Okay, so Martin, you may have already answered the closing question that I'm going to pose, but I'll throw it back to you, and then we'll go back around, and Kirsten will end with you. So what's one piece of actionable advice that you would give to today's audience? So Martin, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. If that wasn't it, come up with something else, but that was pretty good. So what do you think?
I'll probably go down one step further and just get very practical, is to set up an AI governance group. Just start with that joint group between HR and IT and any other interested parties.
I love that. I think that's really key, is that AI governance ethics council, whatever you're going to call it. I think it's right to start asking the questions to make sure you're not caught flat-footed. Okay.
Exactly.
All right, Jennifer, what you got for us? Actionable advice to leave with our audience.
Actionable advice, yes. Bring HR and IT together now. Compare your priorities, share your roadmaps. Find one project. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but just practice this joint partnership, the shared accountability. Do it now. We're at a very good time, actually. End of the year, kind of wrapping things out, maybe finishing some things, also planning for next year. So really good time to be thinking about that. And just the last thing, tagline here, again, very people focused, lead with people. Successful change happens with people, not to people. So that human element is incredibly important as anybody is going through personal, professional types of changes. So I'll leave you with that.
Love it. All right, Kirsten, bring us home.
Yeah, very quickly, as we're at the top of the hour here, is I put the time in up front. I think it starts with a conversation if you haven't already had that conversation, and then kind of contracting, if you will, around the what and the how. And you can either put that time in up front, or you'll put it in, you'll put that time in somewhere. You can either do it up front and have a smoother journey with greater adoption, and less bumps in the road, or you can do it along the way as you hit bumps, or at the end where you have to clean up or fix things. So strong recommendation to put the time in up front.
Yeah, because if you put the time in up front, you've got your ethics council, you're keeping humans in the lead. That will probably avoid brawls in the parking lot. So I think that's my takeaway. No more fights.
There we go.
All right, appreciate you all. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation. I wish we could talk longer, but unfortunately we have to say goodbye. So thanks so much for joining us. Looking forward to seeing folks back on the talent table in December. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.